growing up in the Midwest had some decided perks, one of which was that in early adulthood, I made my way to Chicago, actually a couple of times. And one of the blessings of being there was a coterie of friends that I made and still have. And one of them is our special guest today. I don't want to embarrass him, but whenever I think about St. Francis, I think about John Pierre. Okay, John, stop being embarrassed. You can come back now. I met him when he was just out of high school. We were at a potluck, a vegetarian potluck, hosted by a gentleman called Ted Zagar, very much ahead of his time. This was happening in 1983 or 84. And even then, JP was an extraordinary human being, and you're going to find more out about that today from the Boulder, Colorado area. Welcome, John Pierre.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for those wonderful meditations we just did. Beautiful.
Weren't those cool? Oh my gosh. There's just something about a seagull. They're just so sure of themselves. Yeah, like to be more like that sometimes. So, JP, start at the very beginning. We have such a little bit of time, and I wish that people could listen to you for hours on end. You were a weird kid. You were at this potluck. Nobody else was 18. What got you there?
Well, I've always loved animals and I was always kind and I just wanted to do what was right always. And once I started reading more around high school, 1983, and I start understanding that that chicken McNugget was actually a chicken and that hamburger was actually a cow, well, that just stopped me right there from eating those animals. And so then I just looked everywhere I could to find out more information about this term that I wasn't familiar with, vegetarian and vegan. And somehow I stumbled upon the potlucks, which was really very fortunate. And that's also where I met you.
So, tell me a little bit about your childhood. Did you go to public school? What were your parents like? Were you popular?
Yeah, I went to public school. I was just kind of a normal kid. I loved always animals, and I was always like birds would often hit the windows in Chicago, and I would run out and I would kneel down and pray, and try to get them to come back to life. And in a couple of minutes they come back to life, and I thought it was Dr. Doolittle. So from a young age, I was always trying to be around animals and try to assist them any way I could. But I think I was just raised maybe similar to you, just traditional Midwest. There was no vegetarianism around or veganism or anything. And, we always had pets, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was mainly once I start reading and educating myself about these other values and other ideas that were out there that they all resonated with me right away. And it was like a key that fits in a lock. It was just a perfect fit.
So you got into the fitness business pretty early on. And as far back as I can remember, you didn't just do it as a business, you did pro bono work with domestic violence survivors, with seniors. Tell
Yeah.
us about that.
Sure. Well, I've been working with abused women for 30 years. And in Chicago, I used to work for the shelters. Many of them were kind of hidden shelters. They were homes converted into shelters. And then I used to collect clothing for them and food, actually vegan food. And I also used to collect clothing from the high school that I went to after I graduated, and I would donate that all to the shelters. So I started pretty early doing that. And then also around high school and a little after, I really start seeing a need for the elderly. I start seeing that these folks that really help build our world were kind of cast aside when they were no longer able to perform and have an output like they used to. And so I thought, geez, we really need to take care of these people. They're kind of like our veterans from the war. They're often discarded. And so then I start going into retirement homes, and really about maybe it's getting close to 30 years, I created the first brain building programs in the United States using a plant-based diet, different nutraceuticals, and then brain building exercises and physical like boot camps to develop new neuroplasticity in the brain for them. So I was always trying to work where I thought I was in need or there was no attention being, which back then it was animals, it was abused women, and it was the seniors.
So when you went out and prayed for the birds, did you have a specific religious connection, or was it just you and God and the bird?
Well, I was raised Catholic, so I don't recall, if I was praying to God or what, but I know I was kneeling down and putting my hands in a prayer position and kind of also trying to send love to that bird and please get up, please fly away, please be okay, that type of thing. And most of the time that it happened, again, I thought I did it. They were just stunned from hitting the windows. But that somehow brought me even closer to animals because somehow I thought, oh, wow, I'm helping heal these animals. I got to do this on a bigger scale.
Well, you probably were. We don't know why things happen. So, JP, the whole fitness thing, back when you were getting into it, was not where it is today. It was something that a few celebrities, a few very wealthy people had trainers. Everybody knew you should kind of sort of exercise. But what was it about that that attracted you, that this has been your means for service through your career?
Well, it's a portion, it got my foot in the door, but it was a portion for me to be able to reach people and try to help revamp a lot of their broken systems that they were found. Their diet was terrible. There wasn't much love and compassion. There wasn't much attention to the environment with them. So since more and more people were getting into it, it was really just a way for me to get my foot in the door. People wanted to look better, feel better, perform better. And that was one of the skills that I had. I did lots of different certifications and trainings, and I had studied with many different practitioners, and I just wanted to share that with people. But by no means was it just what I was doing. Everyone thought that's all I did, but it was just a small portion of what I was really doing.
What else were you doing?
Well, I was working with them to transition to a plant-based diet. I was trying to get them to be more friendly to animals and the environment, more loving and kind, more conscientious of the words that they were using in their vocabulary with their children or their spouses. So I was really looking at from a holistic, really perspective. And when Marina, my co-founder and co-writer with my first book, The Pillars of Health, we put that all in there. And people were kind of surprised. They thought, oh, JP, I thought you just did this fitness stuff. I didn't know you did all the nutrition and the brain building and the love and compassion, but that's something I always did. I tied everything together.
So about 20 years ago, give or take, I heard through the grapevine some rather shocking information. Did you hear that John Pierre moved to LA? And it's like, what would John Pierre be doing in LA? But it turned out to be the truth. Why did you go? How did you like it? What did you learn?
Well, actually, a friend of ours, Howard Lyman, who you've known for a long time, he contacted me and asked me to come out to kind of help a senior activist that was probably back then, she might have been in her 70s or 80s, and, kind of help take care of her and make sure things are okay at her house. So I ended up moving out there, staying there. And then, of course, the word got out that I was there, and I start working with clients. And then those clients, many of them were connected. And then before you knew it, I was working with, lots of different celebrities and helping them transition to a plant-based diet, get more fit, and hopefully be more loving and compassionate.
How'd you do
How did I do?
in getting them to be more loving and compassionate?
Well, yeah, a lot of them, sure, we got to go. That ones that weren't vegan, we got them to go vegan. Many of them that weren't as kind and loving as they could be, got that information. And with my background in working with abused women, some of the other celebrities that had terrible abuse as a child were able to finally come out and talk about it and help other women, and especially young girls, about it. So I'm very proud of that work I did. It's just that I got very known for working with celebrities, and that was just a small portion of what I did in my career. It's more important to me that people talk about my geriatric work, because that's so important to me, the fall prevention and the brain building programs that I created. Working with celebrities, they're really no different than you or I. They're just on TV or in movies, and they have a lot more money. But when it come down to the end of the day, they're human beings too, and they feel pain, and they have sadness, and they have problems too.
Well, talk a little bit, JP, about the connection between the love and compassion and health and brain building and all of these other things that are so important to all of us while we're here.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've seen unfortunately happen, for the last 20 plus years is the society just really kind of turning to a demise of society and a breakdown. And one of the things I've always said is we need to be very conscientious about the words that we use and the words that we allow into our being. Sticks and stones, sure, they can break your bones, but words, they can tear your heart apart. And most of the women that I worked with at the shelters would tell me stories that they were hurt more by their husbands or boyfriends' derogatory words than they were from being punched or hit. And so one of the things I always try to share with people is be very conscientious of the words that you allow into your fertile garden, which is your mind, and be conscientious of the television, the movies, the music you listen to, the negative people you surround yourself with, because these words start building up in you. And when we're born, we're kind of like a blank computer, and we get programmed by these words and ideas. And so you have to be conscientious of that. And then you also have to be conscientious of the words that you use around other people. And they can be very hurtful, the words, like I don't even say the word HATE. When we start using that term, it's such a negative, nasty word, and it's so vile that I'm just very conscientious of these words that I use. And I try to share with my clients to be careful of the words that they're using around their children. Because, I can remember working with some very famous spiritual people in LA, and they needed my help. And once I went to their house, I saw their main problem. They would scream and drop F-bombs with their kids all day long, the whole time I was there. And I had to confront them. I said, in your studio, you're wearing these white robes and everyone's following you as if you're these gurus. But really, behind closed doors, you're not a guru at all. I said, you're very mean and nasty to your kids, and you want me to help your kids? Well, it's pretty easy. You need to stop treating your kids like you do and stop that terminology.
So, JP, if somebody here today came to you, I don't know if you're even still doing one-on-one training or coaching, but if you are, or if you were, what would that person expect? What would happen for them?
Well, normally if somebody wants to work with me, I first want to know what specifically is their goal or goals. Some people want me to work with their diet. Some want to work fitness. Some want to work emotional. Some want to work more on changing their environment so it's more environmentally friendly, so they have less plastics and less products in their home. So it's kind of a whole holistic viewpoint. It's whatever they want. If they're giving me full control, well, then I do what Marina and I wrote about in our first book, The Pillars of Health. I pretty much cover all those avenues. Since we're seeing such a high rate of cognitive decline right now, and kids are starting to lose, brain functioning, I focus a lot of my time on a diet and a lifestyle that's conducive to healthy brain functioning and the ability to focus. I focus a lot of time on proper movement, not necessarily going to a gym, but living an active lifestyle and moving, very importantly, throughout the day, not just your half hour in the morning and then you sit for 12 hours, but moving throughout the day. And then, of course, the most important thing I focus on is loving relationships and being kind, and just making sure that every day you're doing something for someone or something other than yourself. You have to extend yourself to the next realm and be selfless and do for others.
So you're no longer in LA and you are in Colorado. So tell us what's happening out there.
Yeah, I'm still between Chicago and Colorado, but I have a nonprofit, Living with Harmony. And we basically work to educate, motivate, and inspire people to live a more kinder life. And we work with a team that helps rescue kids in trafficking. We, of course, do lectures throughout the country for free. But we spend a lot of our time not only rescuing animals, but talking to the public about the environmental devastation that's taking place. People don't realize that we're using about, in terms of purchasing, about 1 million plastic bottles a minute, and about 5 trillion plastic bags a year we're going through. And the question you need to start asking yourself from an environmental standpoint is, when you throw something away, where is away? There is no away. And so our organization really tries hard to educate people about this environmental disaster that's taking place. And unfortunately, the doomsday clock is almost at midnight. Meatless Mondays aren't going to solve our problem anymore. And we need to all take a little bit more action, and we need to be all more responsible for the purchases that we make and the actions that we take in life. So Living with Harmony focuses on that all the time. We don't get paid for that. We don't take any money. That's just our work that we do. So if I'm not seeing clients or doing lectures, then we're rescuing animals or doing work for the environment.
Tell us about some of your rescued animals.
We have about 20 dogs, cats, bunnies, birds, turtles. Most of them come to us that no one can take. So a cat that's paralyzed has to have her bladder expressed manually 3 times a day. You have to be trained to do that, and it takes a lot of time. They need acupuncture, massage, laser therapy. Sometimes we'll get a bird that's missing a wing or a turtle that's missing a foot. So we pretty much take in the ones that no one else would want. They're kind of the misfits.
I feel like you were looking for misfits way back in Chicago. You've just expanded the species reach. So what's the plan going forward? What do you want to do in your next chapter?
Well, we're trying to get, hopefully somebody will help us out with a property, because we want to develop a retreat center and still have a micro sanctuary there. But we want to have a property where we can teach classes and educate the public and still do a lot of women's empowerment courses too. I run a retreat in Chicago in May. This year it's or next year it's going to be May 22nd through the 26th. So that's kind of a little microcosm of what we do, because Marina will come, my assistant, and she helps me. We do my first book, The Pillars of Health, and then our second book, Strong, Savvy, Safe. We cover that, and then we bring in a trauma therapist to talk about trauma, and we talk a lot about the environment. So that gives people a glimpse in what we're trying to create, because a lot of the vegan community and people who are loving and kind and compassionate are getting older, and they don't want to go into a retirement home and be served Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes and butter, and they need to be around an environment of people who are loving and kind and compassionate. And so we're trying to create that community where people can move in the vicinity of where we are and other places around the country. But part of healing and health, as we've seen in the blue zones, and I've been talking about for 25 years, is having a close-knit community, having loving relationships with friends and family, and close-knit ties. Being able to feel safe and be able to express yourself unconditionally is a very important part of healing.
I'm just putting the retreat URL in the chat. Well, that is such an important thing. I have, just among my personal acquaintances, 2 friends, an erstwhile vegetarian and an erstwhile vegan, both of whom are now eating every kind of animal product because they're in a nursing home and there simply is not enough food to survive otherwise. And so this is such an important thing that you're doing. As you talk about the children in human trafficking, you've heard as often as I have, oh, you animal people, you don't care about humans. I mean, obviously that's not true. So tell me a little bit about that very important work that you're doing.
Well, people don't realize this has been going on forever. It's next to drugs. It's the second, biggest thing out there is basically human trafficking in terms of money. And right under that, believe it or not, involved with trafficking is the trafficking of human organs, which often happens to these children when they commit suicide or they just die. They traffic their organs. And so this is another atrocity. And part of this is that, one of the things I've tried to educate, like I've never seen pornography. So I took a stance against it. One, because I don't want my dollar to go to that industry. And I also don't want those type of images in my mind, because again, if the mind is a fertile garden, you need to be very conscientious of what you plant in there, because it's going to grow. And so, I try to explain to a lot of men that I work with that this isn't a very addictive substance, really, that they're watching is pornography. And it's just something that is really hurting their relationship. But once they get bored in their relationships and whatever they're doing, it's unfortunately a common transition then to want something to spice things up. And they see ads for child pornography and they get addicted to that then. So it's something that we need to be educated about. And Marina and I wrote about that in our second book, Strong, Savvy, Safe, which is a guide to safety and self-defense, particularly for women, but for anybody. And that was a lot of experience that I had with working with abused women all these years. But, this is $1 billion industry. And unfortunately, these poor children are, I don't want to speak for them, but many times they'd be better off not on this earth than have to go through the cruelty and the abuse that they're facing. And many of them are told by their captors that if they don't perform, their families will be killed or hurt. So it's an abomination. And thankfully, one of the groups that I work with, Project Child Save, is out there rescuing these children and doing their very best. There's many organizations out there, but I think we need to be educated as a public, and we need to start educating men too about some of the dangers of pornography and what it can lead to in terms of a perversion.
Thank you. So as we wind down today, JP, you've got a room full here of compassionate people, and probably an equal number will be watching this within the next week. So to people who really identify as compassionists, that's what we call ourselves here at the CC, what is your most important message to a fellow compassionist?
Well, I think it's important to realize that not everyone is compassionate, but those are the people that we need to be the most compassionate with. And those are the people we need to have the most patience with, because again, we were all born blank computers. Hitler was born blank, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, but they all got programmed to be who they are. So you wouldn't blame a kid who was raised by the Ku Klux Klan and he's throwing bricks through people's windows. You wouldn't blame him for that because he was raised since birth with that. You would try to re-educate that child and let them know that these people have feelings just like you and I, and they're no different than us. They're different but the same. And so I think it's important that as activists, when I see a lot of activists who are so-called vegans that are very mean and cruel to people, and I think that every time we meet somebody, we need to make sure that we leave that interaction with them better than when they came to it, and spread some magical pixie dust on them each time we see them that's loving and kind.
So as people go out to look for you, I'm putting up a couple of websites, johnpierre.com and livinginharmony.org. What's the difference? What do we,
right?
Yeah, livingwithharmony.org. My apologies. So what are we going to find at each one of those places?
You know, I don't use the johnpierre.com much anymore. There's some videos of me doing some fitness stuff there with a celebrity, and there's some basic information. But the livingwithharmony.org, we are on Facebook and Instagram, and that's where I try to send most of the people, because most of the work is with Living with Harmony. But that's just information that we have, free information. There's a 12-minute documentary on Living with Harmony, and soon there'll be a podcast up that somebody did with us, 3 different segments. So it's just an educational portal, and you can download our planet-based living guide, which is something we created that shows you how to live a kind and loving, way of life, not only to your fellow human being, but to yourself and the animals and the planet.
Final question. What makes you happy?
Well, what makes me happy is when I see good people that are out there being more beacons of light and love. I just love seeing that. And it's the reason I do my work, because if I do a lecture and there's, say, 100 people, and 1 or 2 of them leave and take the information and share with other people, and then they tell me about it or I read about it, that makes me the happiest, because then I realize that all the hard work that I've been doing is paying off. Even though it's a small thing, it's like Mother Teresa said, the smallest deed done is far greater than the largest intention. So that makes me the happiest.
Oh, thank you. JP, it makes me happy that we are on Earth at the same time. Thank you so much for being with us today. And if you can hang around and be in a breakout room, those people will be really, really lucky. So thank you
for your work.
Thank you.